There are houses that have ruled for hundreds of years. The House of Bolton has ruled for millennia, long before the Targaryens had even heard the word dragon, long before the Lannisters found their gold, long before the Baratheons forged their first hammer. The Boltons were already wearing cloaks made from the skins of their enemies. And not just any enemy's skins. From the skin of the Starks, their lords, those to whom they had officially sworn allegiance. This is not a gruesome fairy tale invented to frighten children by the fireside. It is a historical fact of Martin's universe, and the deeper you delve into the history of this house, the more terrifying it becomes. Not Ramsay. What becomes more terrifying is just how long it all lasted. Today we'll be taking a look at House Bolton from the very beginning. The Red Kings of Dreadfort, who for thousands of years fought the Starks for control of the North. The practice of flaying, banned but never stopped. Roose Bolton as the coldest and most dangerous lord in the history of Westeros. And Ramsay as the culmination of everything this house has been for millennia. Let's get started. Before discussing specific people and specific events, there is one thing we need to understand: the DNA of the Bolton family, that single trait which runs like a thread through their entire history. And that trait is not cruelty. Cruelty is a tool, not the essence. The essence of the Boltons lies in this. They are convinced that fear is more reliable than love, and that a naked person may hide something, but flayed skin will hide nothing. There is a phrase that Roose Bolton repeats several times in the books. It is passed down from lord to lord through the generations, like a motto within a motto. The house's official motto is, "Our blades are sharp," but the unofficial mantra goes differently. A naked man keeps few secrets. A flayed man keeps none. This is not merely a justification for torture. It is a philosophy. The Boltons believe that control over the body is control over the man, and control over the man is power. Everything else, honor, treaties, oaths, alliances, is mere window dressing for those not clever enough to see the real levers of power. The entire house rests upon this foundation. The coat of arms embodies this philosophy: a scarlet flayed figure against a pale pink background speckled with blood. In the books, the colors were deliberately chosen to be exactly this way. The pink background represents the color of bare flesh beneath the skin, not black or dark, as in the TV series where the Boltons were turned into standard villains, but precisely this sickly pinkish flesh tone. Martin turns their emblem into an anatomical detail, as if for this house, the whole world is what you see beneath the skin rather than the surface, and this philosophy proved to be incredibly resilient. The Boltons had existed for millennia. They suffered defeats. They rose up again. They bowed their heads once more. They waited again. Their victories were never long-lasting, but they knew one thing for certain: fear controls people better than gold. They had been taught this back in the Age of Heroes, and they followed this principle right to the very end. Now let's take a look at the history of this house from the very beginning, because the pattern you're about to see explains absolutely everything. 8,000 years. That is how far back the history of the Starks stretches. But the Boltons have been there from the very beginning. All this time. The Red Kings of Dreadfort and the Winter Kings of Winterfell. Two houses, one north, and irreconcilable views on how that north should be ruled. Before the north was united, it was divided into dozens of small kingdoms. The Starks held the west, the Boltons the east, from the Last River and the White Knife to the Sheep Hills in the south. It is a vast territory. Dreadfort stands on the north bank of the River of Tears, and the name itself speaks volumes. Tears. It is not merely a picturesque geographical detail. It is a description of what took place here. The Red Kings weren't just cruel. They were systematically cruel. Some wore cloaks made from Stark skin, not a metaphor, but a concrete historical fact within this universe. Royce II and Royce IV, two of the Red Kings, twice captured and burned Winterfell. Just imagine. That very castle with the hot springs beneath it, which the Starks considered impregnable, went up in flames twice. The Boltons reached the heart of the North, and left, and returned. The war between the Red Kings and the Winter Kings did not last for decades. It lasted for millennia. One of the most frequently quoted lines in this context captures the words of a descendant of the line. "We fought from the long night until the arrival of the Andals." The Long Night is a mythical event that took place 1,000 years ago. The Andals arrived approximately 6,000 years ago, according to the chronology of the universe. In other words, we are talking about a war that lasted for thousands of years without interruption, with varying degrees of success, with the capture of Winterfell and castles set ablaze, with flayed skins and winter sieges. What brought this war to an end? An external threat. When the Andal ships began to appear off the coast of Westeros, the last Red King, Rogar the Hunter, knelt before the Starks. Not because they had won a decisive victory, but because both houses faced a common threat. The Boltons and the Starks fought side by side to repel Argo's Seven Stars invasion at the Battle of Weeping Water. When the threat had passed, the truce remained. Formally, because the Boltons never burned their old hatred, they preserved it. The terms of surrender were harsh. The Boltons were required to renounce the practice of flaying, officially, publicly, and it seems it was from that moment onwards that they began to do it in secret. Rumor has it that Dreadfort kept the skins of his enemies, including several Starks, in a special room for hundreds of years. When the practice was banned and they were ordered to remove the collection, it was removed. But the knives never went anywhere. And that is the essence of the Boltons. They know how to bend the knee without bending the will. Remember this detail. It will resurface in hundreds of years' time, and the price to be paid for it will be horrendous. Just because the Boltons had officially become the Starks' bannermen didn't mean they had become allies. They had become a controlled threat, and the Starks understood that. At least the clever Starks did. The rebellions have not ceased. The first major one occurred in ancient times, when the Boltons allied themselves with the Grey Starks, a cadet branch of the Stark house itself, in a rebellion against Winterfell. It was a remarkable political maneuver, convincing a collateral branch of the ruling house that they would be better off with you than with their parents. Something must have been rotten within the family itself for that to have worked. The rebellion was crushed. The Grey Starks were utterly destroyed. The Boltons bowed their heads once more. It is important to understand, why did the Boltons survive where the Grey Starks did not? The explanation is simple and unpleasant. The Grey Starks were merely an extension of the Starks. If they were removed, nothing of critical importance would collapse. The Boltons controlled half of the eastern north. Their land stretched from the last river to the White Knife. Without the Boltons, the Starks would have had to deal with a power vacuum in a vast, harsh region. There were castles, vassals, and trade routes there. The Boltons proved too valuable a tool to break and too dangerous to let go of. It was not to be the last time. Centuries passed. The Boltons once again raised their banner against the Starks. This time, they had no allies. Harlan Stark laid siege to Dreadfort. The siege lasted 2 years. For 2 years, the Boltons sat behind stone walls, with all their supplies, ready to die rather than open the gates. In the end, they surrendered to starvation. And once again, they bent the knee. And once again, they were spared. That was the last open war. After it, the Boltons learned their lesson. No need to raise banners. No need to declare a rebellion. It is enough to wait and to go about one's business quietly. Like a sharp knife lying in its sheath, it does not kill of its own accord, but it is ready. Here's a question that, in itself, says something about this house. Why did the Starks spare them so many times? They wiped out the Grey Starks in a single rebellion. The Boltons were forgiven time and time again. The likely answer is pragmatic. The Boltons are too powerful, too deeply entrenched in the eastern part of the north, to be wiped out without catastrophic consequences for the entire region. Their vassals, their castles, their system of control over a vast territory. All of this would crumble without its masters. It is easier to keep them under control than to destroy them, and the Boltons knew this. It's part of their philosophy too. Be useful enough that they can't kill you. Stay dangerous enough that they're afraid to get rid of you. In A Song of Ice and Fire, there is a mention that the Boltons also threatened Winterfell during the reign of King Edric Snowbeard. This is a separate episode, a separate conflict, which adds another detail to the overall picture. Not a single rebellion, nor even two. It is a pattern spanning millennia, as inescapable as a crack in the foundations. Every new generation of Starks believed that their predecessors had dealt with the problem, and every time the problem returned. Compare this with other houses of the North. The Karstarks broke away from the Starks during the war, resentful of a specific decision made by Robb. The Umbers are angry, but they remain. The Boltons have never shown their anger in public. They have harbored grudges for millennia without ever voicing them. This is the difference between a hot feud and a cold one. A hot feud flares up and ends. A cold one smolders and smolders and smolders until it finds oxygen. The Red Wedding became a breath of fresh air, but more on that later. First, there's something else we need to understand, because it is here that a feature of the house lies hidden, one that is rarely mentioned, and it explains why Ramsay is no accident. Let me focus on the important point. Everything we've been talking about is just the surface-level history. Wars, uprisings, sieges, surrenders. That's what's visible on the surface. But the Boltons have always been a house that hides something beneath the surface. And beneath the surface of their history lies this. The practice of flaying never ceased. It simply went underground, into the cellars of Dread Fort, into a special room that very few had seen, and of which people spoke only in whispers. According to rumors that Martin has several characters repeat, the Boltons continued to flay prisoners right up until they officially renounced the practice. When Ned Stark took office as Warden of the North, he specifically issued a decree banning flaying throughout the North. This was not because the tradition had long been forgotten, it was because it had continued. Right up until those very years, right up until the generation we know from the books and the series. Think about that. Ned issues a ban, officially. This means that during his reign, it was a real problem requiring direct intervention. By that time, the Boltons had been pretending to be loyal bannermen for hundreds of years. And all that time, behind the closed doors of Dread Fort, behind its thick stone walls, and in its cold cellars, it all continued. Flaying is not merely torture. In the context of this house, it is an ideology. To strip a person of their skin is to get to the very core, to remove everything superfluous, all masks and pretensions, all trappings and statuses. Beneath the skin, we are all the same. Roose Bolton knew this better than anyone. That is precisely why he spoke softly all his life. He did not shout or threaten, he simply watched. And everyone in the room knew what was going on in his head. Here lies a key difference between the books and the series. In the series, the Boltons are depicted in black and red, the standard dark aesthetic of villains. In the books, their colors are pink and crimson. The pink background of the banner is precisely the color of exposed, flayed flesh. Martin turned their coat of arms into a literal anatomical detail. This is the house's visual philosophy, embedded in its heraldry. The series made them darker and more frightening visually. The book made them more frightening through semantic precision. There's one more thing that people usually keep quiet about. And now things are getting really interesting, because amongst the fan theories, there's one that's actually backed up by the text itself. Among the tales of the North is a legend of the Night King, the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who saw a woman from beyond the wall, brought her to the Night Fort, and proclaimed himself king and her queen. He ruled for 13 years with the aid of dark sorcery. He was overthrown by the combined forces of the kings of the North and the Wildlings. Question: who was this man before he became the Night King? Here's what sources in Martin's world say. According to one account, he was a Stark. According to others, he was a Bolton, a Nori, a Flint, an Umber, or Magnar Skagos. No one knows for certain, because all records of him were deliberately destroyed. This is a theory, not canon. But what makes it interesting is that the books explicitly state Dread Fort rose up in failed rebellions from the very beginning, and some of the universe's sources explicitly cite the Night King's Bolton origins as one possible theory. If this theory is correct, then the most terrifying thing the North has ever produced in its entire history may have come from Dread Fort, from a house whose blades are sharp, from a house that wore the skins of others. This is, of course, speculation, but it fits into the bigger picture. The Boltons have always stood on the darkest fringes of everything that existed in this world. The boundary between human cruelty and something more ancient and terrifying. And that is part of what makes their history so uncomfortable. But let's return to the documented facts, because what follows is the story of a particular man who embodied all of this better than anyone else in the 1,000 years before him. His name is Roose Bolton, Lord of Dreadford, the Leech, a man whose voice never rose above a whisper, a man whom Ned Stark never loved, but always used, a man who became Warden of the North by personally killing his rightful lord. To understand Roose, one must first understand who Ned Stark is. Not a retelling of his life story, but his philosophy. Ned believed in honor as a guiding principle. Honor is not an abstraction. It is the commitments you keep, the agreements you honor, the oaths you remain true to, even when it is not to your advantage. For Ned, honor served as a compass. He went wherever it pointed. Roose Bolton is the North, the same cold land, the same harsh customs. Yet he is the antithesis in every word. Roose believed in what he called realism. The world is governed not by obligations, but by fear and power. Treaties exist only as long as they are profitable. Oaths are kept only as long as the cost of breaking them is higher than the cost of keeping them. Honor is a luxury that only those can afford, who have enough armies to survive once fortune turns against them. And you know what? In Martin's world, Roose has more of a case than Ned. Ned is dead. Roose lived a long life and died at the hands of his own son, whom he himself had fathered. In the books, Roose is described as having an almost otherworldly appearance, pale, almost gray skin, a quiet, almost inaudible voice, colorless, almost transparent eyes. He never drinks wine. He regularly bleeds himself using leeches, which earned him the nickname the Leech Lord. There is a description in the books where his face is called a pale gray mask, with 2 pieces of dirty ice in place of eyes. Visually speaking, he is hardly human anymore. He is something that pretends to be human well enough that no one can bring any specific charges against him. Roose never raised his voice in anger. Never. When someone angered him or threatened him, he would simply look at them, silently. He would work out how to destroy that person, and he would do it later, at a convenient time, without emotion. Several characters in the books describe interacting with him as meeting someone who lacks the usual human reactions. He doesn't pretend to be calm, he is simply different by nature. The TV series portrayed Roose differently. Michael McElhatton gave him a touch more humanity, a touch more directness in his dialogue, and a touch more interaction with Ramsay. It's an understandable choice for television. You need a character the viewer can relate to, not a mere shadow of a character. But in the books, Roose is all the more terrifying precisely because of his ambiguity. The reader remains unsure of his intentions right up until the Red Wedding, even though clues are scattered throughout all 3 books. Here is one such sign. After the Battle of the Green Fork, when the Stark army was defeated, it was deliberate. Roose placed his own men where they had the best chance of survival, and the men of other houses where they would be killed. He systematically mowed down the heirs of the northern houses, using others' hands, whilst keeping his own army almost untouched. This isn't immediately obvious. It only becomes clear if you reread the first 3 books with an understanding of who he really is. Another sign, when the fearless companions captured Jaime Lannister, Roose insisted that he be handed over to the Lannisters, not for a ransom, to send a signal. He had already begun to switch sides, even before announcing it. Jaime became a message to Tywin. I am in control. I am ready to negotiate. Name your price. This was a political game that Roose played alongside the war, unseen by Robb, who formally regarded him as one of his chief commanders. And now, for the most important thing about Roose Bolton, the thing that explains absolutely everything that happened to the house. Roose Bolton understood something that neither Ned nor Robb, nor most of the lords of Westeros, understood. He understood the difference between power as a position and power as a reality. Ned Stark was the Warden of the North. That was his title. His real power rested on the loyalty of his bannermen, on respect for his honor, and on the network of relationships he had built up over the years. Take away his honor, and the whole structure would collapse, which is exactly what happened. Roose Bolton built his power differently, not on respect, but on fear, not on agreements, but on self-interest, not on loyalty, but on dependence. When the Red Wedding was over and Robb Stark had died at Rose's own hand, he was granted Dreadfort, the Keep of the North, and Winterfell, not for his loyalty to the Targaryens or the Lannisters, but because he was needed. Tywin Lannister chose him not because he loved him, because Roose had an army, and because he was cold enough to carry out what others could not bring themselves to do. In the books, Roose rules the North alongside Ramsay at Winterfell, facing ever-increasing pressure from all sides. The Northern Lords hate him. The Freys hate him for using them to further his own ends. The Lannisters do not trust him. Stannis is marching with an army. In A Dance with Dragons itself, it is shown that Rhaegar understands perfectly well that the situation is unstable. He is balancing on several blades at once, and does so with the precision of a surgeon. In the series, Ramsay is killed by Roose in Season 6. He is stabbed in the chest with a dagger, in exactly the same spot where he himself had stabbed Robb at the Red Wedding. It is a beautiful irony that the series highlights. In the books, Rhaegar's story is unfinished. According to most theories within the fan community, Stannis will win the battle on the ice, and House Bolton will fall at that very moment. This is a theory, not canon. The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring have not yet been written. But here's the thing. Roose Bolton, for all his shrewdness, made one mistake he really shouldn't have. He created Ramsay, not just biologically. He raised him. And this is worth considering separately, because the story of Ramsay is not simply the story of a monster. It is the story of a house that created a monster with its own hands. Ramsay Bolton, the bastard of Dreadfort, the legitimate son of an illicit union. Rouse found his mother on the banks of the River of Tears whilst she was washing clothes. The miller, this woman's husband, had not sought his lord's permission to marry her, which was considered a breach of the law. Rouse hanged the miller from a tree and took his wife right there, beneath his swaying body. A year later, she arrived at the gates of Dreadfort with a baby in her arms. Roose was about to kill them both, but then he noticed that the child had colorless, almost transparent eyes. So he spared them. This is an important detail that the series got spot on. Ramsay inherited his eyes. The only thing that linked him to his father were 2 pieces of dirty ice. That was it. Roose didn't give him life out of love. It was because of the taboo against killing a relative. It was a rational decision. Why kill him when he could be put to use? Think about it again. From the very first day of his life, Ramsay existed within a system where his worth was determined not by love, nor by upbringing, but by a biological coincidence. He was needed because he had the right eyes, nothing more, and Roose never hid the circumstances of his birth from him. When Ramsay, as a grown man, asked his father about them, his father recounted everything calmly, almost with scientific interest, as an event that had happened and had practical consequences. You know how it turned out. Ramsay grew up to be a creature with absolutely no restraint. Not because of madness, not because of some congenital defect. He became the epitome of everything the Boltons had been for millennia, only without the mask. The Red Kings wore the skins of the Starks and hid them deep within Dreadfort. Ramsay flayed people in public, on hunts, in cellars, and saw absolutely no need to hide. Rousseau once told Ramsay quite bluntly, "One cannot rule a country without fear, but fear is not the only tool. One also needs the appearance of order. One also needs a mask." Ramsay cast aside that mask, and that precisely was his downfall, not his cruelty, but his lack of political calculation. The difference between the book version and the TV series version of Ramsay is significant here. In the books, Ramsay is more coarse in appearance, unattractive, with thick lips and a heavy build. In the series, he was played by Yvonne Rion, who gave the character a certain charm that is absent from the text. In the books, Ramsay is terrifying precisely because of his unpleasantness. He is not a charismatic villain, but something hideous and inexplicably dangerous, like a venomous animal without any beautiful markings. Another key difference. In the books, Ramsay is not the North's main antagonist. Roose remains the main antagonist. Ramsay is cruel, Ramsay is dangerous, but he is a tool, albeit an uncontrollable one. The main threat comes from his father's cold calculation. In the series, the writers have shifted the focus to Ramsay as a more spectacular villain, and that's understandable. Iwan Rheon is magnificent in the role, but this changes the meaning. Roose has become less terrifying in the series. In the books, he is far more significant. The story of Theon Greyjoy, who became Reek, is explored in far greater detail in the books than in the series. In A Dance with Dragons, entire chapters are written from Theon's perspective, offering an inside view of Dreadfort. This is not merely a tale of torture. It is a story of the systematic destruction of a person's identity. Theon no longer knew who he was. He could no longer remember his name. He could no longer remember his past. Ramsay achieved precisely that. Not a broken man who was afraid, but a man who no longer existed. Only a function remained. In this context, the Dreadfort becomes a metaphor. It is a place that strips people down to their bare bones. It strips away their skin, their names, their past. It leaves only what lies deepest within. And this is precisely what the Boltons have been doing for millennia. Only Ramsay did it literally, without metaphor and without a mask. In the series, his story arc reaches its climax in the Battle of the Bastards. Jon Snow emerges victorious, Ramsay is defeated, and dies, torn apart by his own starving dogs in the cage he himself built. It is the ending that a Martin-style universe demands. You die by the very thing you created. Ramsay created a system of terror using dogs, hunts, and dungeons. He died by the dogs. And this is where a question arises that is worth pausing to consider. The mirror of generations. For there is a pattern in the Boltons' history that repeats itself time and again. Here is a pattern I began to notice the deeper I delved into this story. The Boltons always followed the same pattern, time and time again, over hundreds and thousands of years. They rose to power. They were crushed. They bowed their heads. They waited. Then they rose again. And each time, their rise was due to the weakness of others, not their own strength. The Boltons did not form coalitions or rally allies around a grand cause. They waited for the Starks to grow weak, until Ned left for King's Landing, until Robb began to lose the war, until Tyrell Lannister offered the right price. Ned Stark and Roose Bolton are like a mirror gazing into itself. Both are from the north. Both are harsh. Both understand the cold and the nature of war. But Ned builds his world on the belief that honor protects. Roose, however, builds his world on the conviction that nothing protects except strength and fear. Ned died by following his principles. Roose died by breaking them. He created an heir without principles and was unable to control him. This mirror of generations continues to hold true. Look at Ramsay and Robb. Both were young when they made their most crucial decisions. Both came to power not through maturity, but through circumstance. Both overestimated the fear they could command. Robb thought his honor was enough to keep his allies. Ramsay thought his cruelty was enough to hold the whole North. Both were wrong in the same respect. They did not understand what really keeps people in line. And Sansa, the girl whom Ramsay took as his wife to consolidate his power over the North, turned out to be the very person who played a key role in his ultimate downfall. The Boltons, with a 1,000-year history of victories over the Starks. In the end, it was a Stark who brought about their downfall. There is another parallel that almost no one notices. Roose II, one of the ancient Red Kings, captured and burned Winterfell thousands of years ago. Ramsay captured and destroyed Winterfell in our time. This is no mere coincidence. It is a literal repetition thousands of years later. The same land, the same walls, the same castle. The Boltons reached it again, and again, they ultimately lost it. It is as though the history of this house moves in circles, rather than in a straight line. Each circle is slightly larger than the last. The stakes are slightly higher. The fall is slightly more terrifying. Martin loves mirrors like this. It's his favorite motif. Patterns repeating across generations. Destinies that echo through the descendants. The Boltons are a perfect illustration of this. But there is something else, something hidden deeper down. In the books, the coat of arms is pink and scarlet. In the series, it is black and red. This is no accidental change. Pink, the color of bare flesh, is interpreted in the books as Martin's direct statement about the essence of this house. They peel away the layers, both literally and metaphorically. A house that exists solely to understand what lies beneath the surface. In this context, one might view the firm's motto in a different light. Our blades are sharp. This is not a threat in the style of a war cry. It is a statement about our profession. We know our trade. Our tools are in good working order. We are ready to work. This is not the language of warriors. It is the language of surgeons, unburdened by ethics. Compare this with Stark's "Winter is coming." That is a warning. The world is dangerous. Be prepared. Our blades are sharp is not a warning. It is a statement of fact. We are a threat, a constant, acute threat, ready to be unleashed. Dreadfort, as a building, also speaks volumes. In the books, it is a massive stone castle with thick walls, underground chambers, narrow passageways, and a special room. When, in A Song of Ice and Fire, you enter it through the eyes of Theon, who was transformed there into reek. The castle feels like a place from which no one emerges unchanged. It is a space designed to tear people apart, not just physically. Now, regarding what Martin hasn't written yet, The Winds of Winter will be published one day, and it seems likely that it will feature the battle on the ice, in which Stannis Baratheon attacks the Boltons at the walls of Winterfell. In the books, the ending is not yet decided, but the direction the story is taking suggests this. The Boltons are holed up in a castle that hates them, in a country that hates them, with the Freys as their allies, a family everyone else hates too. It is impossible to hold out in such a position indefinitely. There is another theory circulating among fans that is hard to ignore. It is, however, just a theory, not canon. It suggests that Roose Bolton is somehow connected to the ancient dark magic of Dreadfort. His inhuman pallor, his complete emotional coldness, his habit of bloodletting with leeches, his eyes identical to Ramsay's. All this adds up to an image of something more ancient than just a cruel lord. The text does not confirm this directly, but neither does it refute it. Martin has deliberately left Rouse enigmatic. Whatever it is in his nature that is so inhuman can be rationally explained by psychopathy, or it cannot be explained at all. Whatever the real answer may be, one thing remains clear: Dreadfort is a place that breeds something special. Not villains in the usual sense, something more systematic. Here is my verdict on the Bolton family. It is not the mightiest house in Westeros, nor the wealthiest, nor the most influential. But when it comes to sheer survival, they are phenomenal. For millennia, they have lived in the shadow of the Starks. Millennia spent formally in supporting roles, rebellions, defeats, bowed knees, and more rebellions. And in the end, they did reach Winterfell after all. They reached the throne that had stood before them for centuries as an unattainable goal, and they lost him within a few years. That is the bitter truth of House Bolton. They knew how to wait, they knew how to endure, they knew how to bend the knee without breaking their will, but they did not know how to hold on to what they had gained, because fear holds people in its grip only as long as it outweighs the thirst for vengeance. When Jon Snow arrived with his army, when Sansa came not as a victim, but as co-ruler of that army, fear ceased to work. And almost nothing remained of House Bolton. In the books, the story isn't over yet. The finale is still to come. But the pattern we've seen hasn't gone anywhere. The Boltons rose to power. They were crushed. The only question is whether they will bow the knee again, or whether they will be destroyed this time. If the pattern holds true, the answer is already written in their coat of arms. A pink background, the color of bare flesh, the color of something stripped of its protection. The Boltons lived for thousands of years, flaying others. And in the end, they lost everything in a single generation. Perhaps that is exactly what Martin meant. Cruelty as a philosophy of survival works for a long time, a very long time, but it has its limits. When you flayed everyone around you and are left alone, it turns out that you yourself are vulnerable too, and that sharp blades cut both ways. Let us know in the comments what you think. Could Roose have held the north if he'd found a way to rein in Ramsay, or was the fall of House Bolton inevitable? And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis.